Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is the OverPower Mountain Podcast, and I am your host, Marcel, the greatest OverPower player of all time. What a weekend! What a weekend we had that just passed. I'm talking 40 plus players. We saw some good, we saw some great, and we saw some ugly. Today we are going to focus on the good and the great. As for the ugly, well, if you know, you know. I imagine a lot of people will be slowly tuning in as the people who do not wish to watch the Stranger Things debut tonight. Don't run away if you forgot that was on. However, you all know how we start the show, even though it's been a while. And first and foremost, a hello to everybody who has entered the arena. Of course, the great Phil Keffer, Merlin coming in, Sean Ballantyne wanting to see what I got cooked up about his deck. And of course, Ben Newcomer, Nor popping in as well. Looks like a lot of people want to hear the review of what they played and what I view it as. I appreciate that most of all, Joshua. I'm glad that you're a fan and definitely tune in and watch this. But, however, let's do it the way the Overpower Mountain podcast does it. And of course, that's the news. Overpower, overpower. Overpower news. So, to start the news segment off, as the season has come to a close, news for the upcoming events and sets will be upon us very shortly. And of course, most of all, I will be giving it to you the second I know about it. Now, we do actually have some breaking news and some shocking news that has occurred over the last couple of days. Now, I'm always on the inside, and I'm always going to be that investigative journalist for you. Glad you're in the room, Ricky. We're going to talk about you in quite a little bit. The big news drop today is I have finally landed the hottest player in the modern game for a player profile interview. Thomas Keane will be joining me next Wednesday, December 3rd, live. That's right. Thomas Keane will be joining me live here on the Overpower Mountain podcast. You will get to tune in, ask him any questions you want. Now, of course, be sure to tune in as we will talk the season, strategy, and the future of OP and the modern format. I know everybody out there would love to hear Thomas's ideas about how he's approached the season, the deck builds he's created, and we've cooked up a great show that's going to be fantastic for you to watch. I will be starting to actually do a lot more player profiles in the near future, but we will get into that very, very, very close. Yes, of course, Thomas Keane. I know in the past I have called him Klein, but it is Thomas Keane, my man. So next week, December 3rd, live, Wednesday, 8 p.m., he will be here. Tune in. We're going to have a great show in regards to a beautiful back and forth. Now, in the very recent news, Monday on OP Adventures, a potential spoiler dropped, as it was spoken that there may be a potential new suite of any heroes coming in the Skybound set. Now, I have reached out to LRG for more info. Now, I did not anticipate a return message in such a short time frame, but they actually did respond to me. Now, Joe responded, and he has actually confirmed Starting in Skybound, you will have to choose a battleground, which will give you access to a certain suite of any characters. Of course, a brand new suite being completely breaking in Skybound, which in my mind means that I can only imagine as every set moves forward, there will potentially be new battlegrounds and new suites with access to new any heroes. So already starting in Skybound, you will get a chance to actually completely switch out your set of any heroes that we are playing right now for a potentially new full set of any heroes. So strategy looks like it's about to start opening up in the game of Overpower. This is breaking news. Nobody knows about this except for you that are watching right now. Now, of course, as I mentioned, not a lot of news to come in terms of like the Nationals placement, but I will get that to you as soon as possible. New suite of any heroes played with battlegrounds coming out in Skybound. Breaking news, and that's the news. Overpower, overpower, overpower news. Now, you don't come here for the news. You come here for the knowledge. And of course, I like to give you the knowledge that at least is floating through this noggin in my head. Hello, everybody who's starting to join the podcast now. We just covered the news, and you might have to rewatch that because there was some actual breaking news over the last couple of days. Let's start to get into this because that's why you're all here. Arriving at PAX felt like going to the Nationals in the 90s. The convention hall was packed. The stimulation for the senses was at every turn. It was at times hard to concentrate, at times exhilarating, but overall, a fantastic, fantastic event. LRG did a fantastic job with both the final regional in terms of running it efficiently and the hype that it seemed to build on the convention floor. You constantly saw players walking up, asking what the game was, seeing that they had a feature screen explaining the top prize that was there that day, and plus, of course, those Omni-Man mats on the table really drew a lot of attention. The Overpower booth was also awesome to see. You know, as a fan who always loved Overpower and will always love Overpower, I never got to go to one of those first conventions where those early tournaments were and where Overpower was actually debuting. A lot of my early start was pre the first Nationals and more in a local game store. So it was really neat to see Overpower in what looks to be the start of a budding sensation. But let's get to what you are all here for the breakdown of the top 4 decks. Just before we do that, though, please, of course, take that sec and like and subscribe to the podcast. You know, we're still trying to grow the channel. I appreciate all of the viewers always, and thank you for that. Just because I appreciate you actually viewing so much, and I appreciate the people who show up live to the podcast, let's do a giveaway. And the giveaway is just for the live audience right now. A sealed starter deck. That's right. Sealed starter deck of the brand new Skybound Overpower. As you can see, sealed in full plastic. This is the giveaway we're giving away right now on the show, hot off the presses from the Overpower booth itself. First person in the comments. Oh, sorry. Yeah, two decks. There's tons of decks in there. Now, that's the one they were playtesting, of course, for all the people who are going. And, of course, I want to make sure somebody at home gets it right now. So the first person in the comments that can drop which character in ERB can retrieve any power card from the draw pile without the use of a home base. Which character in ERB can retrieve any power card from the draw pile without the use of a home base? I want the name of the character, the stats of the character, and the name of the special card. First person to put all that in there, I'm sending you that starter deck. It's yours. It's yours. Now, of course, don't be running off to, the deck builder to find out all that information. I hope it's just popping up in your head. All right. So when I see it pop up, I'm going to say congratulations. We'll write it in. But of course, let's get to those top 4 decks. 4th place, Nor. Wow, wow, wow. Zorro, Captain Nemo, the Three Musketeers, Jane Porter in reserve, event, Time Wars. No event played, though. And, of course, home base, Round Table. Cataclysm he was using was Fairy Protection. I paused there for a quick second as you just heard a fantastic deck. Joshua Christopher, fantastic. I saw both of the answers. It is correct. You win. And I will be sending this your way, my friend. Congratulations on that. Long-time viewer, and you definitely deserve an amazing prize. Nor, Zorro, Captain Nemo, Three Musketeers, and Jane Porter. Wow. Talk about a unique build. Solid team defense in Zorro and Three Musketeers. The same characters I just mentioned, Zorro, Three Musketeers, both giving you that team defense 5 for the team. Now, of course, I will say I imagine the Three Musketeers one played bigger than a 5 from time to time throughout the tournament. But of course, that's base talk we're talking. Now, he played dual of both, so 2 of each copies. So that's, of course, 4 different defensive cards he can use for the team. Not only do those 2 characters, Zorro and Three Musketeers, bring you that defense that you are always desperately looking for in the modern game. Those same characters in Nor's build also brought 69 venture points. 69 venture points. Now, I know it's a funny number. 69 venture points. Can you count up how much that is? That's sometimes the amount people have in their whole deck. Minus, obviously, some power cards, which are, back and forth. 69 venture points from 2 characters. No wonder he was in the top 4. Like, a savvy build for Zorro as well. The special stack that he chose to play. Now, I was actually thinking of Zorro several times, and every time I thought of Zorro, I'm like, if I played Zorro, I'm definitely playing 2 of those Combat 7s. Like, why am I making that a 1 per deck when it's not a 1 per deck? You've watched the show in the past. If a card is good enough to be in your deck, is it good enough to have 2? Would you be upset if you duped a 7? No. One of the biggest cards you can get in a modern hand. So, savvy build in terms of going that way for the Zorro special stack. Those 2/7 combats, I think, is just a really top tier deck building panache that, of course, Nor is starting to show. I imagine between most people going gangbusters at Zorro being the mono 8 on that deck to KO that guy, most characters actually probably got to keep or got to get all of their key specials off. And now, of course, being the Three Musketeers, just dropping bomb after bomb after bomb of just these multi sort of 5s, 6s, 7s, and multi 8s. Now, I will say one thing. He must have defended Zoro all day because Nor was one of the few people who popped his deck out real early for everybody to see. And when you actually look at Nor's deck, he has 10 specific cards for Zoro with only that fairy protection to really sort of say no in one turn. Now, whew, whew, Nor must have been playing that dicey game all day. Just like, ooh, I gotta keep Zoro around for one more round because I know he's got at least 4 more cards I gotta get through, and I do not want to discard those later. So he must have just been defending Zoro with everything he had. Now, of course, that's great because that takes all the pressure off someone called Mr. Nemo, the captain, the hidden gem. And we're going to talk about Nemo in a second, but there's one thing I actually want to bring up. Nor was one of only 2 players this year to top 4 in 2 different regionals. With only a year of gameplay under his belt, this is showing you that new style of player that I've been talking about, that has entered the game, obsessed about the game, self-taught, and worked hard within his Columbus team to rise himself up these levels. Now, being 1 year in the game, we all know where we were at that point in time. I mean, a lot of us in the old school was a little bit different. They had a different game back then. But in this new age of OverPower, you can see it takes people a long time of hard knocks to get to a level of A, even making a top 4, and B, making 2 in the same year in some of the stiffest competition in a brand new game. Now, it shows how much Modern compared to Legacy is a brand new game of OverPower. Now, obviously, all the old stuff still plays in, and a lot of that deck building and savvy of actual gameplay works. But it just shows that you can be new to the game, study, work hard, and you can actually rise up the ranks pretty quickly if you dedicate yourself. Nemo is officially a powerhouse. Now, I also have played Nemo in a tournament, so I actually know the power of this guy. In this deck, I loved the fact that he was almost like the third target I can imagine in a lot of builds. Now, some players might have looked at it as like, he's the weakest link. I can attack him because, he's a 7 intelligence. But of course, flexing that 6 combat, as well as the any powers that are now in almost every build, it played perfectly to the idea that once people saw that weak link or opening on Nemo, it played right into never set foot on dry land, which is the pure avoid. It's the pure avoid and move Nemo to reserve. Now, between that and the fairy protection, there's obviously rounds where he was able to almost like semi-lock off 2 characters and push everything to whatever character he wanted out of the Musketeers or Zoro. I also noticed about Nor's build that he adopted what I'm going to coin as the West Coast style of power card distribution. It for sure helped him with the dupes of this deck. Nor really did a very great job of almost doing what I talked about in my 1-year anniversary episode. I think it was super tip number 1, maybe. Almost making every card a 1 per deck. Just sacrificing those duplicates or triplicates on cards that were monsters sevens, eights. Like, these are big cards going forward. Now, I'm actually shocked he didn't play two ethnologists, only going with one. Now, I assume he thought, oh, maybe Nemo could be a target and could almost get KO'd early in the game, and he didn't want to sit there with too many duplicates. But again, great overall build. Now, I loved the spectrum spread in his build. It was actually really well done. Of course, the team focusing primarily on combat and intelligence, flexing in the energy with his any heroes, and then, of course, actually almost like trying to dupe his opponents by making his lowest power cards brute force and almost daring somebody, just saying, oh, it's just a one, it's just a two. For Venture, these are cards, you just take it, just take it. But of course, looking across the board, not knowing that those are literally the kill shots that were probably killing characters all day. Now, I had seen people on the boards talking about his deck and talking about the aggro style of this deck, and I actually really agree with that. I think Nor was probably flexing a lot of attacks towards Zoro and then proceeding to almost push like a 3-6, a 3-8, a 3-7, or dare I say, using his power cards in great array because, of course, he had that defense for the team in those fives. Nor was also the first person to get a spot in the Nationals. And I can only imagine he will be a force when that tournament comes around. He is repping that Team Ohio strongly. And I can actually see how they're all working with each other and making each other better players. So I would say, as he continues to grow both in his experience of play and deck building, which he's starting to show a great prowess for, this is the type of guy that when you sit across, you're not going to think this is an easy game by any means. 2 top 4 finishes in Season 0 regionals. Only one other player did that. Fantastic, fantastic season. An amazing tournament, Nor. I gotta say, it was really quite interesting just to see this deck, see this build. And when I looked at Legacy and those types of deck builds, I always looked at Venture Total. And in one of my podcasts, actually one of my questions for the podcast was, which character can produce the most Venture points? And it was Three Musketeers. They were grossly underrepresented throughout the year. And I'm glad that you brought both them and Nemo to a place of high stature. Great tournament. Congratulations. Well done, Nor. I look forward to playing you in the Nationals myself. Third place. Third place. Sean Ballantyne. Sean Ballantyne is about as OG or original OP gangster as there is. This guy used to walk an hour just to get to our local game store, just to play funsies games in the back room. And I can tell you there is not too many people that have the experience he has, because not only does he play continuously both online and in person, but I have never seen Sean ever turn down a game of OverPower, unless of course it's incredibly late at night and there's a tournament the next day and he's trying to get some sort of sleep. Sherlock Holmes, Jane Porter, Joan of Arc, Professor Moriarty in reserve. Cataclysm, Fairy Protection. Event set, Tarzan, King of the Jungle. Event used, A captive no more. That's, of course, brute force icons do not count to the venture total for the round. Home base, the land that time forgot. Sean has a unique playstyle. Most top players fear high leverage games against him. He plays uniquely. The process in which he plays his cards, the way he looks at the game, and the overall experience he's had for the past 30 years shows, because he sits down at every game of Overpower and basically just says, I'm ready to play. I can beat you. I've beat the best. I know I can beat you. He utilized Jane Porter on the front line, both for her low threat level and to just show you that Jane Porter can deal on the front line. There are a few 16-point characters that I think can hold their own on the front line. But more and more players are starting to creep these characters from the reserve, where they're just there to give extra additional threat level points, to a badass threesome front line, and starting to show that 16-point characters, when used in both strategic thought and great driving by the deck player, can actually hold their own on the front line. So he used her not only for the low threat level and ethno-archaeology special to combat the current shift meta. Now, of course, that's the one that makes you discard all specials, both in play and placed, that say for remainder of game and remainder of battle. Also, not without my friends and Archimedes Q Porter, acting almost as a pseudo way to get rid of those big specials in everybody's deck, whether they be the any heroes or the big 1/X from characters, and actually getting to almost pull them out of the deck. Now, of course, not without my friends being a 7 energy that, if successful, you actually flip through your deck and you take the top 3 specials off your deck and remove them. Like, that could be a power leech, that could be your, or that could be a Grim Reaper, that could be your fairy protection, that could be, a Nemo 10. It could be big cards. And then, of course, Archimedes Q Porter being the 5, which, of course, and we're going to get to that in a second, Joan of Arc making that a 7 if EFL's in play. And that peels the top 3 cards off your deck. At one point, he actually told me he was in a very pivotal game. It was super close. He wanted to go to the next round. Archimedes Q Porter gets played, and the opponent peels off their Hades right off the top of the game. Like, what a card to get phenomenally done. Fair enough. Flip-flop the names. You get where I was trying to go with that one. But such a unique way to approach knowing there's not a lot of negates, knowing that you want to get those specials out of play, and basically getting to get them out of the deck. Really unique way to look at it. And of course, if you're looking at her, like I talked about Nemo and Nor's deck, you're looking at her like the weak link. She is the one character you do not want to attack. If he has a card in his hand, I guarantee you, sitting across, you're literally thinking the last card in his hand's avoid 1 attack, discard card from hand. Whew. Whew. Like, oh wait, did I even talk about Lady of the Jungle, which is also providing like a cheap pin option? Oh, this is my max 6 character? Yeah, that character and Zeus can attack for remainder of battle. Like, great thought. Putting this character on the front line to sort of bounce off both Joan of Arc and give you that additional threat level, while adding just a punch from a 16-point threat level. Now, of course, Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc. The Lady of Modern. EFL providing plenty of oomph once it's in play early or late. As I can imagine, most people left Jane Porter till the end of most games. They probably were like, I'm gonna kill Sherlock. Okay, now, or I'm gonna kill Joan of Arc. I don't want EFL to get out. I don't want your Sherlock cards to get out. And then the next thing you know, EFL gets out, and Jane Porter's just there, like, oh, you thought I was a max 6? Mm-mm-mm. Now I'm throwing 8s. Now I'm throwing 8s at you. And I'm boosting everything when you try to attack me. I can only imagine that Jane Porter was a key character going into those late game rounds because of EFL boosting. And as I mentioned, that 5 combat, peeling 3 top cards off, becoming a 7? Wow. Great synergy between those two characters. Now, we've seen a few people in the past actually play those exact two characters together. I believe Joe Peters was the first person in Seattle to sort of like, at least on camera, debut. So there is synergy there. And everybody at home should contemplate that, both when playing against them and to potentially play them yourself. Sean's deck was actually so dominant that 5 out of his 7 rounds of Swiss were ultimate victories, both winning Venture and KOing all characters. In our car drive home, we actually were discussing it, and we were like, there's actually no name for that in Overpower. And I was like, it's the ultimate victory, because you not only killed or KO'd all of their characters, but you won the Venture on top. Now, I can imagine there's probably one more level above that, which is flawless victory, and you kept all 4 of your characters as well, which is just like mind-blowing. But 5 out of his 7 games were ultimate victories. Think about that. He KO'd all of his opponent's characters and won Venture on the last round. Wow. That says dominant day. That says dominant deck. That says dominant player. Now, of course, Sean's use of the land that time and every player forgot was nothing short of masterful. Nothing short of masterful. The land that time forgot. Why do we always forget it's there? Oh boy, it costs 3 threat level, but oh boy, is it worth every single deck building point. Constantly applying a KO pressure that no other deck in the whole tournament had. Which means when you play against a player like that and you sit down and you're about to play against them, and you just went through 5, 6 rounds of Swiss, and now all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can take this hit, I can take 2 hits. You're getting in the flow of the tournament. And then you go against a deck like this, and you have to just constantly remember round after round after round that you're literally one bad concede and 1 power card throw away from KO. You can't even understand until A, you play against it, or until B, you just get KO'd round after round by it, and then you go, I'll never forget it, and then 2 rounds later you forgot it again, your next character's KO'd. Now, we're going to come back around to this land that time forgot, because Sean actually used it in one of the most unique, smart ways I've seen a player sort of capitalized on that home base. And we're going to get into that. But I really wanted to talk about how Sean capitalized on the Tarzan mission set. Now, I know a lot of people aren't using missions. which I think is a little bit of a faux pas, as I do think there are missions out there that truly work in the modern format. However, I can understand if you have a lot of draw potential, this game is a little bit different. It is more of a KO pressure fast game. But the mission sets, when they pop, can actually truly benefit you. And he capitalized on having a low brute force count in his deck. And of course, even the ones that were brute force, he was more than happy for you to take, Sherlock multi for, or his own multis. Of course, take those all day because guess what? Every single one's a KO shot, I imagine, in his deck. This event often played hard to his advantage. And as we were traveling home, we're going over games, he oft would say, this game I actually ventured, incredibly hard because I looked across the table and I saw nothing but brute force over on their side. What a great way to sort of add in almost like an accoutrement to your deck. It's not what he played towards. It's not, anything that sort of like blew a game away. But if he was close to like 3 or 4 venture and he looked across the board and he saw 2, 3, 4 cards, he knew he could push at that time and just finish the game off right there because your cards do not count towards the venture total. It's one of the last few styles of events where you can actually sort of like gear towards it, play hard, and then actually like try to finish a game off in one of those rounds. Sherlock Holmes is one of my favorite characters in the whole set. And Sean is using him fantastic. He's obviously providing, the negate, Reaper block, and the speed package through the multi-force. The true magic of Sean's deck, though, did not come through Sherlock. The true magic in Sean's deck lied in his thought of the end game. Now, very few players are actually looking or thinking towards the end game in OverPower. And I think that's a big mistake. Because, yes, they did 50-minute rounds in this tournament. And I can say that, a lot of games actually went to the first hand, second hand of Power Pack. You have to think about your end game in OverPower. Just like in the game of chess, there's openings, there's mid-game, and then how do you finish your opponent off? When you're down to your last 2 characters, what's your win condition? What's your strategy? Now, Sean's strategy was a genius. Professor Moriarty, coming up from reserve, not only backing up his 8, but Professor Moriarty coming up from reserve with mathematical genius was pure genius. What a lethal card to have in Power Pack. Again, your 8's coming up. By then, 2 characters KO'd to 2 characters KO'd. I still have an 8 character. Did you have a mono 8? Because I probably KO'd them by now. So Sean had this 8 character coming up. This is a win condition on its own. And I just want you to take a sec. You're in Power Pack. You got your 1 or 2 character against his 1 or 2 characters, and you draw your perfect Power Pack hand. You both do. Or actually for Sean, I guess he'd have 1 less because he'd have mathematical genius in his hand. So he has 8 through 2, and you have 1 through 8. And you're just like, I got this guy. I got the perfect hand here. You start playing card for card for card for card. He just throws his 8 at you. You use your 8 to defend. Okay, not a big deal. You throw 1 more card. And then he goes mathematical genius. And then you go, okay, well, we're in the Power Pack. I don't have a negate for that. He looks at the top 5 cards. And he pulls another 8. from his deck. All of a sudden, your mind clicks, oh my god, he just pulled another 8 from his deck. We've already used our 8s. I can't block that. I concede. I concede. And he goes, guess what? That 8 is coming anyways at you because I have the land that time has forgotten and you forgot. And now you just got a second 8 thrown at you after you conceded. So you don't even get to throw something back in return. And he just landed another 8 on you. Oh, wait. Mathematical genius is on the top of the deck and he's going to continuously do that for another 8, another 7, another 6. And every time you throw yours, he's going to defend it. Go get Mathematical Genius. Go get that highest power card he can. And then you're going to go, oh, I can't block that 7 you just got. I can't block that 8 you just got. I concede. Well, there's no safety. There's no safety in Sean's jungle. You're just going to get eaten alive. You're just going to get eaten alive by the land that time forgot. Devastating. Devastating. Thinking about the end game, thinking about a unique way to use a reserve and not just think, oh, I need this, oh, I need that to sort of attack or defend from reserve. Like, this is old school. This is almost like Thing 10 level in Legacy. You know, you got Thing in the back, you got your big 10, you know it's coming up and it's going to be a big hit. This is on another level. And that is how you make top 4s, especially in Modern. Digging deep, look at all the layers I just talked about. And let alone Sean with his unique style of deck builds where he can, you know, dare I say, allow characters to sort of get KO'd and not feel the pressure because he has his stats backed up and not overly playing in a heavy special deck. As you can see here, Merlin's even throwing it in the, Sean's actually throwing it in the chat here. And he's actually saying one person was so understanding and scared of Mathematical Genius, they used Duality from Morgan Le Fay to remove it from reserve. What would be a dead card in the game, they actually used one of their biggest cards to get rid of because they understood. They understood. Fantastic. Fantastic concept. This is why I say when you sit across from Sean Ballantyne, you better be on your A game. I know, and I've played hundreds, if not thousands, of games of OverPower against Sean in my lifetime. He's one of the players I've probably played the most. And I am thankful for that because the amount of stuff he comes up with and, you know, sort of like floats and, you know, rubs off on my aura. Fantastic. So I look forward to having some more test games with you before the Nationals and sharpen my own razor's edge. Great performance, Sean, showing that true old school grit. Great deck, great build, and great play throughout the day. Holding strong, literally losing in the top 4 to just a single light error, which is the modern game of OverPower. Second place. Final 2 decks. Final 2 decks in the tournament. Second place. Adam Abelkop. Hope I got that one right. I never actually said your last name in front of you when we chatted. Adam Abelkop. Wicked Witch, Morgan Le Fay, The Mummy, and Ra in reserve. Using Asclepion as the home base, Fairy Protection as the Cataclysm, and his event set being Chronicles of Mars. Events used, Giant Man of Mars, and the Chamber of Reptiles. Giant Man of Mars, of course, being almost like a pseudo-shift. And Chamber of Reptiles, of course, discarding a special card in play that affects remainder of game or remainder of battle, giving your opponent +2, or +3, I think. The only game of reference I have personally against Adam was when we faced off in Seattle Regional number 1. What a game. It went down to our last 2 characters, final hand, single power pack. Of course, at that time I had Billy the Kid left. And I can't recall who his character was, but I think it was Jane Porter. So obviously, having a 7 to a 6, I was able to just throw that 7 and kind of call it a game. But what a barn burner that game was. Back and forth, back and forth. He is a super solid player with great fundamentals. Shift mechanic with Asclepion is beautifully done. You know, it's one of those things that I think once it becomes perfected, the shift mechanic with Asclepion will be the dominant deck of the day. Personal opinion. Looking for card advantage through removal is top tier. Not only do you take that KO pressure off in Modern, but you draw for it, where we're already in a starved format of both defense and draw power. With access through Morgan's Apprentice of Merlin and Avalon's Warmth, you have a lot of access already from one character to start removing with Asclepion and get those card advantage going. While also Asclepion making the Mummy a literal card drawing machine. Through 3 different removal style cards of the Mummy and an avoid draw, I imagine there were games where Adam was drawing left, right, and center. Like I'm talking, I recall if you watch, I think it's the only Modern tournament that's up right now. I think it's round 7 of Seattle. You can actually see in that game, I'm using a similar idea of Asclepion and the Mummy. And there's actually rounds where I think I draw like 3 cards off Asclepion alone, let alone potential for, avoid draws. What a great concept to both balance the shift meta with Asclepion with 2 characters that can dynamically actually take advantage of that. Now, of course, he's also utilizing the events to complement his deck. Not just resting on the laurels of the specials, but using those events to actually help him in the way his deck played. An extra shift when the Wicked Witch's shift, Harness the Wind, didn't come up early enough. I can imagine that shift, both as I know from playing it, can phenomenally help you. But of course, that's that 1 or 2 game where you're like, I almost KO'd that guy, and now I gave him a shift for the round. So it is a double-edged sword, but I can imagine, especially in a Asclepion style build, there are so many ways he can capitalize where you can't. And of course, a way to eliminate cards like EFL and Korax, Miriam and Jackie Clayton through the Chamber of Reptiles was a great addition. This is an undervalued event, especially in this heavy EFL Modern environment we play. And Korax were popping up quite hard in this last tournament as well. So I can see people also looking for that shift mechanic in their decks. I loved from Adam's deck. I loved hearing the combo of Morgan's Shapeshifters Guys, which is 3 combat play a character's special. Follow up with a character's special, a teammate's special. So Shapeshifters Guys into Mummy's Fury of the Desert to actually remove a hit from Morgan. Now, of course, that's Mummy's 5 brute force, remove a hit from the permanent record of Mummy. But when played after Shapeshifter's Guise, is actually a Morgan's card now. What a great idea. So he had the ability to sort of remove off the character of his choice by either, of course, playing it through the Mummy or following it up from the Shapeshifter's Guise. Great, just little sort of interactions in a deck that I'm sure came up throughout the day. Also having a backup 8. You know, we often talk about the modern environment, the threat level cost of characters. And a lot of people sacrifice that second 8 for that additional threat level points to like a Nemo or a Count of Monte Cristo. And a lot of people now are starting to play even dual suited 8s in terms of an 8 of one color and an 8 of another color. Now, both second and third place did it a la one color. And both of them used the 8 in reserve to back up the stat grid process, which, looking at it now, is a very smart way to go, because I can only express that whenever I'm playing a mono 8, and as we discussed in Nor's deck, that mono 8 character is just taking a beating all day. And I've played Wicked Witch in one of the regionals where she was my mono 8, and I can tell you right away that she's a little hard to defend, especially when Harness the Wind doesn't come out early. Now, this gives him the ability to almost sack Wicked Witch after Harness the Wind has come out and a couple of specials. And now you're not all of a sudden saying, okay, now I don't have access to my 8 power cards as well right now. Just a great thought process in terms of that. But now I want to talk about how Adam also approached the end game and understood that the end game is real, especially in Modern. Like I said, 50-minute rounds, and that was only because we had a time restriction. I can imagine they still might do unround or untimed finals in the future. With that being said, Power Pack games are real, and you need to contemplate how to move forward with it. Now, Adam's approach to his endgame different than Sean's, but unique in his own right. Having the backup 8 for the Power Pack is one thing, but coming up with Raw's Advanced Universe card. So don't even think you're getting that off the table. There are 0 ways to get that off the table. Okay, I get it, Hercules, blah, 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 blah. You don't have that card when that comes up, I'm telling you. Because guess what? If you had Hercules on your team, they killed Hercules on purpose. Raw coming up with Shards of the Staff, giving him and the team a huge Power Pack +2 to defense. Again, wow. Great conceptual idea. Great way to use a stat backup as well as a way that that character can actually change the game. I imagine there are games that, Raw came up in the middle of a game and you just go +2 to all defensive power cards. And we all know we're using our power cards for defense in this game. There's no other defense minus a few cards. So that's what you're using as a defensive standard. And in the middle of the game, all of a sudden they're +2? Huge, huge. Let alone going into the Power Pack and you're +2 to defense. Because we all know many people haven't played many Power Pack games, and not a lot of people are great in the Power Pack. So that's already its own challenge for a lot of people. Now he's +2 to defense on every power card he draws. Oh, the Power Pack, that's all power cards. Great thought to the end game, and also finding cohesion through stats in your deck. Now, don't sleep. Don't sleep on the board control this deck has. Like, with the 2 discards, one giving more card advantage Opponents must have actually been scared to play specials all day, especially big ones. You're sitting there round table, you place your fairy protection, boom, gone. Not only is it gone, but I'm drawing a card for it. Wow, talk about a round changer. Adam is starting to make a name for himself. He will be a player to fear going forward in the modern format. And honestly, congratulations, Adam. Great tournament, and I expect that you're probably going to have a few more great tournaments in the future. Now it's time. The first place deck. It's what you're all here for. It's what you're all here for. Now, Ricky was actually nice enough to send me the deck visually to work my write-up off. And it was great. I know he's going to release it to the community soon enough, or at least I think he's going to. But what a great deck. Now, he started right away by understanding the meta, by saying, how can I approach the current meta and make it my own? Because if anybody knows anything about Ricky, you know that he loves deck building. He loves creating. He loves looking at cards, looking at interactions, and trying to do something different. Now, yes, he did use Woo Witch. He did use the Woo Witch meta. Now, Woo Witch is phenomenal. Wicked Witch Wukong. The Woo Witch. I get it. It's fantastic. But he said, I'm not going to rest on the laurels of just Woo Witch. I want to do something else with this deck. Wicked Witch, Sun Wukong, Dr. Watson, and Carson of Venus in reserve. Cataclysm, Heimdall. 221 Baker Street as the home base. And the event set, Tarzan, King of the Jungle. No event. Smart, though, to use such an event set that people might actually contemplate. You have some unique, powerful events in your deck that could change around. And of course, they're thinking about it. 10-0. 10-0. Undefeated. Undefeated tournament. This is a feat only accomplished 5 times before by 4 players in OverPower's entire history of tournaments that have been regulated. That's a extremely small club to join. Only Phil Keffer, the late Phil Miller, and Gary and Sutton, with yours truly, the OP G.O.A.T, having 2, have accomplished this feat. Undefeated in a tournament is the OverPower equivalent to a baseball no-hitter or a perfect game. We've all played in tournaments, or at least you're going to as you proceed and watch this show and hopefully get out to one. And I can express to you, to be on all day, to have your mind focused, to not have variance hit you in a bad manner. It's wild. There have been many 9-1s in tournaments. There have been many 8-2s. To go undefeated is truly an amazing performance and should be recognized. From this day forward, you shall be known as Ricky, the Wiz of OP Sauceda. Capitalizing on the shift meta with Wicked Witch. I don't know if you timed that well with the Wicked release of film and theater. But the Wiz of OP wanted to add his own twist. The man behind the curtain, pulling the strings of everything. His twist showed you both solid play and masterful deck building, showcasing Dr. Watson's frontline prowess and his synergy with Baker Street. Also gaining additional shift mechanic through Watson's shift and draw. Shift and draw. He's already got the Woo Witch going on, and now he's shifting away from them and drawing? Of course, that's through Watson's always there for a friend, which I can imagine Watson looked over and said, Wicked Witch, I'm there for you. Send that 10 over here. I'll take it. Oh, and I'll draw. Carson providing both a Reaper stop in Zhang while further leaning on Baker through the use of telepathic training. Now, Ricky was actually playing the 6 intelligence from Watson as well. So there's a lot of moments where he for sure was opening up your hand to a certain degree, pulling cards, shifting, drawing cards. Like, this is what I talked about with Sean's deck, where utilizing a 16-point character and his special suite in a way that you gain those threat level points, plus you actually can use them in a smart, proper manner. And then once you do, you can shift everything over to them and KO them because that character no longer matters once you get the 6 and the 7 multi out. 4 make an additional. Like, Watson's throwing stuff. And guess what? You're just leaving him there. And then guess what? He's shifting everything over and KOing him anyways. Great way to sort of put your twist and utilize a 16-point character on your front line, both for the threat level points and the special suite. This is what I'm talking about, how you're going to make these top 4s in the future by looking at interactions like that, taking gambles, because I can imagine there were times where people got a few hits on Watson, and then he said, now we're going to shift it over here. Now we're shifting other places. The Woo Witch is powerful, and you added Doctor in front. There's some real power in this deck. And of course, finding that synergy with Carson of Venus in reserve. Using both, like I said, Zhang and telepathic training, all while backing up most of the Witch's power cards. Great deck synergy all around. Knowing he couldn't place his Cataclysm, and if anybody's ever played the Woo Witch, you understand pretty quickly that there's a lot of times that you have Fairy Protection and you have Harness the Wind and Transportation Trickery, and the next thing you know, Fairy Protection just isn't really that great. And it's a card you're actually like, oh, that's good. This guy's not going to die, but he's also not going to die with these other 2 cards. And then, of course, he's using Baker, so he can't even place it for the round he doesn't have those. Now, he knew all of this. Obviously, he just won the tournament 10-0. I don't need to tell you he knew this. But he opted for Heimdall. And, oof, is this slowly becoming a modern powerhouse Cataclysm choice? Not only are you getting that additional Reaper block in your deck, but you're gaining a little bit of that card advantage, which I think this deck was kind of lacking in a sort of certain way. There was ways he could do it, ways he could get that, and ways he could push card advantage back into his direction. But having that moment where you just go, oh, I'm going to avoid that and draw, even if you know it's in his deck, there's still times where you're just going to be like, I counted cards and I counted wrong. and now I'm actually down a card. Oh, and he just shifted something over to Watson. Oh my God, now I'm down 2 cards. Or he put on Harness the Wind and is taking hits, and now you're down a cajillion cards. Crazy number, but you get what I'm trying to say. Great choice on the Cataclysm. I've actually been looking at Heimdall a lot lately. I think in Modern, it's actually a very, very viable choice of Cataclysm, especially if you don't have the ability to place your Cataclysm or any heroes and you're not using Round Table. With his front line throwing an 11, an 8 multi, 2 7s, as well as 6 of a complete offsuit that opens up both hands, there becomes a lot of must block hits coming through that astral plane. You know, he was capitalizing on his grid. You know, Ricky used Teamworks, which a lot of people aren't using in this game. Ricky actually used a numerous amount of Teamworks compared to what most people are building in the modern environment. And I imagine that's actually where he was gaining his almost like string pressure on your opponent. I also, when I was playing in the Ohio, I actually went with a very heavy teamwork build too. And it is very viable. And especially with the Woo Witch, when you're not having to use your power cards for defense, all of a sudden you can throw these teamworks with your power card follow-ups because you don't need them for defense. You're taking everything but applying that KO pressure back with 2 or 3 power cards after a teamwork. Great way to understand that the deck didn't have a lot of speed and he added it in a different way. It just shows that there's still a lot of deck building to be discovered, and great players are going to start finding these nuances and pushing forward. I can only imagine that string pressure was just keeping opponents on their toes, seeing 2, 3 teamworks placed constantly throughout the game, going, how am I going to deal with that? How am I going to deal with that? Oh, he's got another shift. Oh, how am I going to deal with that? Ricky mentioned when we were sort of back and forthing a little bit as well, both his round 7 and his quarterfinal game was both against Justin Sade, which anybody out there knows, just another great player, you know, popping big time on the modern scene with a lot of things, but also well known in Legacy. When you play a great player like that, you automatically know games are always going to be tough. And he actually said that both his round 7 and quarterfinal came down to the final hand battles. Both your round 7 and the quarterfinals coming down to last hand. Whoever draws a better hand wins the game. It shows that not only in a tournament like this and not only in a 10-0 run do you not just need a great deck, you need a great performance, but you also need a little bit of luck. You know, you can't run a tournament like that without gambling occasionally and getting a little bit of luck. And coming down to last hand, where you're both drawing for your tournament, talk about a pressure 8 cards to look at. It just really truly shows how close the game of Modern is, that 2 games back to back can come down to last hand, and it shows how close the player level of experience is getting in the game as well. Ricky has been climbing the OverPower mountain for a long time. I think it was maybe 2020 when he got into the game with the Oklahoma crew, and I know there's Team Oklahoma now, and they're starting to practice together and get ready for the nationals and future events. And of course, Ricky the Wiz showing that he's maybe the cream of the crop of Oklahoma at the moment. Some of my favorite recent games have actually been against him in the past couple of years. I implore you to check out the old Battle for Boston games. They are phenomenal. It shows both Ricky's great learning play and the way he's elevated throughout these tournaments. You have come a long way since Negata Deadin. Also, being the number one GO.A.T and one of my biggest fans, I would like, as a show of the highest honor, to give you the first title. Now, this is a title I'm going to give out to players that earn it. I don't give it. This title is earned. Ricky, the Wiz of OP, Sauceda. I'd like to give you the first title from the OverPower Mountain podcast. And I'd like to title you first as the first Sherpa of the OP Mountain. This level of the OP Mountain is the highest honor and level a player can receive. You have reached the peak of the OverPower Mountain, and I congratulate you. Not many people can say they've had the same journey as you through up the mountain and got to the top. And as a true Sherpa, you now are on your way back down and then on your way back up. And I can only imagine that there will be many, many, many a time that you will reach the top of the mountain and also help other people reach the top of the mountain. Because I know your personality and I know how much you help other people in this game. And I just want to award you with that title. So I congratulate you, Sherpa, Ricky, the Wiz of OP, Sauceda. And I hope that all of you strive out there to become Sherpas of the OverPower Mountain. As there will be more Sherpas in the future, and I will give out that award when warranted. Ricky has skyrocketed to become an early front runner to the modern national championships and all OP format winners. I have to say again, that is not something that we all as a community should take lightly. This was a performance for the ages, and I personally look forward to watching those games and watching a master like you play this game now. I know I personally will learn a lot from it, and I'm always looking to improve myself, improve my game, and I will be taking notes from the Wiz of OP, because this doesn't come along often, friends, and we all should recognize it. Well, what an episode. Great performances from all the players in the top 4. Don't forget to tune in next week for the player profile of Thomas Keane. And of course, we are going to always bring you the latest of everything OverPower. We got episodes coming up on the next few Wednesdays. And honestly, I hope you keep enjoying. This is what I'll say. Thanks for watching. Keep thinking OverPower, deck building, and getting to the top of the OP Mountain. Because somebody just did. And you can too. This is the OverPower Mountain podcast. And I am the OP G.O.A.T. Good night.